Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan, and this is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, it's the world's fastest growing major economy. India's growth has recently outpaced forecasts despite global and local headwinds. But can the nation become an economic superpower? Wooing Latin America, China deepens its economic ties with nations across the continent as the trade war with the US escalates. But will Latin America pick sides between Washington and Beijing? And turning on the taps, the world's largest group of oil producers says that it will fast-track oil output. But what's behind OPEC Plus's decision, and will that send crude prices much lower? Prime Minister Narendra Modi aims to transform India into a developed nation by 2047. The country continues to be the fastest growing large economy and is poised to take over Japan as the world's fourth largest economy. In a recent boost to Modi's government, India posted its best quarterly growth in a year, but critics question whether that really translates into improved outcomes for all of India's people. They're calling for deeper reforms to boost the nation's competitiveness and to sustain that robust growth. So will India be able to realize its dreams of ranking alongside the US and China and possibly replace Beijing as the world's factory? Or could global and domestic challenges still hold it back? We'll discuss all of that with our guests shortly. But first, a report from Joel Evans.
In the first 3 months of 2025, India's economy grew by 7.4%. Strong activity in agriculture, steady public spending and a demand from rural communities, as well as a booming construction sector, have contributed to the positive figures.
This is a very strong GDP growth in Q4 and the strongest in this financial year. This also marks a rise from 6.2% in Q3 to 7.4%.
India's economic success has some asking whether it might benefit from the Trump administration's trade war with China and a possible longer-term strategic decoupling. Amid the turmoil and uncertainty, New Delhi has ambitions to replace Beijing as the world's manufacturing hub. Its huge workforce and location are two of the country's unique selling points, but it's had limited success in attracting shifting investment from China. A tough business climate and red tape have long frustrated foreign investors and stalled the country's manufacturing growth, with its share of GDP stuck at 15% for 2 decades. And the economy has failed to generate enough jobs for India's expanding young population. New Delhi is currently negotiating its own trade deal with the US. Trump announced a 90-day pause on his long-planned reciprocal tariffs, although a 10% base tariff continues to apply to countries including India.
Because of Trump's tariff announcement, there is an atmosphere of uncertainty. The speed at which we're getting orders has gone down considerably after the announcement of the 90-day pause and the 10% increase in tariffs.
Experts have argued recent trade deals with Western countries are less beneficial to India.
This kind of negotiation that's going on, what has gone on with UK, what has gone on, etc., that has been adverse to India. In the free trade agreements that we've done in the past with South Korea, with Australia, with the ASEAN countries, it is India which has suffered because our exports have not grown, their exports have grown. So our imports from these countries have increased more than our exports could increase, and that is because in technology terms, we are weak.
US giant Apple indicated recently that it was shifting most of its production of iPhones headed for the US from China to India. However, trade analysts have cautioned that such a manufacturing investment could yet stall. Washington and Beijing recently announced a trade reset that could derail India's ambitions. Elon Musk's Tesla announced this week it is not interested in producing cars in India. Despite the challenges, India's economic growth is forecast to continue, albeit at a slower rate of 6%. For now, its dreams of fully replacing China as the world's manufacturing hub appear to be a long way off. Joel Evans, Al Jazeera, for Counting the Cost.
Garima Kapoor is a research economist and the executive vice president at Elara Securities. That's a financial institution. She joins us now from Mumbai. Good to have you with us, Garima. What's behind India's continued economic expansion? Can the government take all the credit here, or are there other factors at play? What's the government getting right, and what more could it be doing?
Thank you. Thank you for having me over. I think the biggest credit for India's economic resilience goes to the government, largely because in the post-COVID era, India might have been the only country that focused on macroeconomic stability and embarked upon a very aggressive pace of capital creation, particularly coming from government spending. Having said that, the other factor that probably seems to be working in India's favor is that in the tariff war between US and China, India probably emerges as the only country capable of providing scale and competitive edge in terms of manufacturing and shifting of supply chains. Along with that, government's resolute focus in ensuring that manufacturing scales up, along with a softer and accommodative monetary policy from the central bank of the country, that is the RBI, all have been working in favor to basically ensure that the growth rates remain supported even as the global backdrop of volatility continues to remain high.
All right, so lower interest rates are going to help a lot of people. Things are looking pretty good for India right now economically, but what are the potential pitfalls? You mentioned Trump tariffs there.
So the biggest pitfall for India, of course, right now is that while India is a beneficiary of the geopolitical climate, which is basically pitting US against China, India also remains at a receiving end of the constant global volatility in terms of Trump's reciprocal tariffs due to emerging geoeconomics and geopolitical climate. More importantly is the fact that the current geopolitical climate is going to lead to a significant slowdown in global trade volumes at a time when India is embarking on increased capacity for manufacturing and exports. So I think this should be the biggest risk that India should look out for in the near to medium term.
All right. Garima, given all of that, the IMF predicts that India is on track to leapfrog Japan to become the world's fourth largest economy this year. How long before it overtakes Germany to become number 3 and gives China a run for its money? Is India looking to replace China as the world's factory? Is that realistic?
See, with regards to Japan, let me quote you some numbers. Both India and Japan are projected to become an economy size of close to $4.2 trillion sometime this year. The good point is that India's economy continues to expand, whereas Japan's economy is facing economic headwinds. So the leapfrogging of India overtaking Japan will happen anytime this year, probably in the middle of the current calendar year. That would place India already the third largest economy behind that of US and China. Now, coming to a latter part of your question relating to becoming the factory of the world, it is to be very realistic to be saying that it is difficult to replace China and the scale at which China manufactures and its depth across value chains. However, the emerging geoeconomics is making it more and more difficult for Western countries to depend on one large economy, that is of China. And hence, diversification is the order of the day. While India may not be able to raise the capacity so much, it is going to remain an incremental beneficiary for sure of the diversification.
We're almost out of time, Garima. I need a shortish answer if you can give me one. We're talking about GDP here, and let's face it, GDP means nothing to most people. Is GDP the best way to measure the health of an economy? It tells us very little about how people live and work and how unfairly wealth is distributed within a society. How healthy is India's economy really? Are all of its people benefiting from this economic growth?
So while we can debate whether GDP is the best measure for health of the economy, let's not forget that among all large economies, India is the only economy that has uplifted nearly 170 million people out of poverty in the last 10 years and does direct benefit transfers to the poor, accounting to nearly $74 billion yearly. So while there might be pitfalls in the measurement of GDP, there is no denying to the fact that in terms of inequality and in terms of welfare economics, last 10 years, India has scored really well.
OK. Really good to talk to you, Garima. Many thanks indeed for being with us on Counting the Cost.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
A power shift could be unfolding in Latin America. The continent has long been considered to be in the US's sphere of influence, but in recent years, China has stepped up its efforts to replace it as Latin America's primary development partner. Beijing has invested billions of dollars in infrastructure, energy and technology projects in the region and has recently moved to strengthen those economic ties even further. This as nations across Latin America seek to negotiate better trade deals with President Donald Trump. Now, in May, China extended a credit line of more than $9 billion to Latin American and Caribbean countries. China also pledged to boost its investments in the region at the fourth ministerial meeting of the China Community of Latin American and Caribbean States in Beijing, which included the presidents of Brazil, Colombia and Chile. Polling commissioned by The Economist suggests that public perception of China in Latin America is improving fast. In most places surveyed, Beijing is now seen as the more respectful superpower and the more reliable trading partner. China is Latin America's second largest trading partner and the top trading partner for countries like Chile, Brazil and Peru. According to China's Ministry of Commerce, bilateral trade hit a record high of more than $500 billion last year. China's direct investment in Latin America reached almost $15 billion, while Latin American companies have established 37,000 enterprises in China as of March this year. 2/3 of Latin American countries have joined Beijing's massive Belt and Road Initiative infrastructure program, with Colombia the latest to join in May. And in a recent attempt to boost trade ties, citizens of Brazil, Argentina, Peru, Chile and Uruguay are now allowed to enter China without a visa for up to 30 days for business, tourism, cultural exchange or transit. Well, many of those travellers going to China will be travelling through Lima's new airport. Peru is banking on a big airport expansion to bring in more tourists. Capacity is expected to reach 40 million passengers a year. That's almost double the number who went through Lima's old airport in 2024. But as Colin Baker reports, getting to the new facility on the outskirts of the capital could be tricky.
2 new runways, a state-of-the-art control tower, 46 boarding gates, and a so-called airport city that includes hotels and shops. Lima's new airport is now among Latin America's ultra-modern air travel terminals. This $2 billion investment by German company Fraport GS and its subsidiary Lima Airport Partners is 3 times the size of the city's old airport. Peru's President Dina Boluarte inaugurated the airport 2 days before it was fully operational.
Today, with the inauguration of this airport, the most modern in Latin America, our country is moving towards the future.
After mining and agriculture, tourism is the country's 3rd largest industry. Experts estimate that by 2034, it will contribute $31.5 billion to the economy and create tens of thousands of new jobs. The construction of the new airport has future-proofed the country's tourism and travel industry. Authorities say they're expecting 40 million passengers a year, and some of those will be Peruvians headed to cities like Beijing. China has recently allowed citizens of 5 Latin American countries visa-free travel for up to 30 days, as the 2 regions strengthen ties with the world's 2nd largest economy, a move that has been welcomed by locals.
I think it would be a good experience to travel there, to enjoy both Chinese culture and tourist sites.
But it's not all smooth traveling. There are security concerns, and access to the new airport is presenting a challenge. And urban planners say getting to the airport will be a nightmare. The highway and metro stations promised by the government have not been built yet. The only access is across 2 temporary bridges, commonly used for emergencies, which pedestrians do not have access to, leaving tourists and nearly 17,000 airport workers to struggle. That aside, government optimism remains high about the airport's longer-term impacts. Colin Baker, Al Jazeera, for Counting the Cost.
Felipe Larraín is an economics professor at the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile and the former finance minister of Chile. He joins us now from Santiago. It's good to have you with us, sir. What do you make of this apparent pivot towards China? It's nothing new, is it? China's been partnering with countries in the region for what, 20 years or so now. This can't be blamed solely on the Trump administration, can it?
This is, as you correctly say, Adrian, this is a trend that started over 20 years ago, and it's a reflection of China that has grown very fast for many years. And we all know what China started these reforms in 1978, but then, growing at almost 10% per year for 30 years will get you to be, get China to be the second economy of the world. So, and if you take, for example, what is happening in the year 2000, so it's 25 years ago, China was an important partner, but for us, let's say take Chile, about 5% of our exports, 6% of our exports went to China. But today, almost 40% of Chilean exports go to China. Chile is the country in Latin America most exposed to China. But it's not only Chile, it's, as you said before, it's Peru, it's Brazil, it's also Uruguay. So if you go to the south of Latin America, the most important trading partner for several countries is China. If you go to the north, it's different. For Mexico, about 80% of exports in Mexico go to the U.S. And if you go to Central America and the Caribbean, the U.S. is a more important trading partner. For Colombia, the U.S. is #1 trading partner. But going south, you see this amazing penetration of China as a trading partner, not only as a trading partner, but also through investments. And yes, the sort of the cliche story is that China is coming to take control of our natural resources, but it's beyond that, because it's in natural resources, it's in transport facilities and infrastructure, it's in utilities. China has invested heavily in utilities in Latin America.
Okay.
So the Chinese presence is very high.
Yeah.
And
so,
in my view, it is not that we have to choose between the U.S. and China.
This is what I wanted to ask you, sir. This apparent pivot towards China. In America's backyard, is it wise? I mean, how difficult could the U.S., could the Trump administration make life for Latin American countries that cozy up to China and do more and more economic deals with China?
The Trump administration has shown that it is ready to use tariffs, to use trade restrictions as part of a leverage for different things, for economic objectives, but also for objectives that go beyond economics, immigration, drug, penetration into the U.S. So we already know that. We were surprised that the Trump administration put a tariff of 10% on several countries that have been for many years partners. But not only that we have trade agreement. We have several countries in Latin America have a free trade agreement with the U.S. Chile was the first to have that after Mexico in NAFTA. And for Chile, we just we woke up to receive a 10% tariff, and we are now in the negotiations with good faith, with respect, but with a firm position that these are unfair tariffs that have been placed in Chile. And let me tell you why. And this is the case for not only Chile, but other countries in the region. You put a tariff of 10%, that was the minimum tariff that was set. But Chile has a trade deficit with the U.S., and we are a very reliable trading partner. We want to be open to trade with the U.S. and with China, but it is true that these tariffs, if they keep, because they may go away in the negotiations, but if they are kept, it will be harmful for us in Chile and the region.
One final question, sir. To what extent have Latin American countries lost faith in the U.S., certainly as an investment partner, and now with the tariffs as a trading partner? What are the pitfalls of getting closer to China? Could some of the poorer Latin American nations end up indebted to China in the way that we've seen some African countries?
If you play the cards fairly, if you play it open, and you say, Chile, and several other countries in the region. We're open to trade with the world, and we are a reliable trading partner for all our partners. But it is true that some countries, not the case of my country and others, we have not received Chinese loans, but we have a very significant presence in the last years. First it was trade, but then it came investment, and we welcome investments from all over the world. We are an open economy, we're an open country, and so we hope that we can keep in this position, but of course, it's, some countries retaliated to the US. Of course, we didn't. I don't think retaliation is the course. The course is diplomatic negotiations, among partners that respect each other and that have, a free trade agreement signed voluntarily by both parts.
It's really good to talk to you, sir, on Counting the Cost. Many thanks indeed for being with us.
Thank you, Adrian. Good talking to you.
After years of cutting oil production to prop up prices, the group of major oil producers, OPEC Plus, is now doubling down on boosting output. The shift in the oil cartel's policy is seen as an attempt to win back market share by nations like Saudi Arabia and to punish countries that are overproducing oil. The kingdom, which has previously shouldered the largest share of output cuts, appears to be sending a clear message that it will no longer hold back production if other nations don't. 8 members of the Saudi-led oil group have recently agreed to boost production for the 3rd consecutive month. This as President Donald Trump has pushed for lower oil prices to curb inflation in the US. Now, the group, including Russia, said that it was acting, quote, in view of a steady global economic outlook and healthy market fundamentals. OPEC Plus will increase production in July by a combined 411,000 barrels per day, matching increases scheduled for May and June. The oil cartel aims to bring back 2.2 million barrels a day of output that it has idled in recent years, in a process that was previously planned to last until late 2026. Well, oil prices rose to almost $65 per barrel immediately after that decision on geopolitical concerns. Since Donald Trump took office in January, the price of the international benchmark Brent crude has fallen by around 15% to nearly $64 a barrel. That's well below what some oil-producing nations need to balance their budgets. The International Monetary Fund estimates that the Saudis need prices above $90 to cover their economic plans. Now, should the OPEC Plus group opt to pump even more oil, prices could drop below $50. If oil falls under $60 a barrel, for every dollar below that threshold, experts estimate 5 drilling rigs could be pulled out of US fields, hurting the economy of states like Texas. Gaurav Sharma is an energy market analyst with Oilholics Anonymous. He joins us from London. Good to have you with us. Now, production is one thing. Export volume is another entirely. Why has OPEC decided to raise output production for the 3rd straight month? And is it going to find buyers for that oil?
Adrian, good to be back in the program. It's nice to speak to you again. What I would say here is that OPEC, the stance that they have adopted is they've been a bit lax. They have been too focused on prices, and that strategy was not working. A lot of people thought OPEC would raise production a lot earlier than it started at this point in the cycle, but they finally come around to it, and now it's all about market share to begin with. And of course, we'll come to the internal politics within OPEC in a moment, but I think for the moment, they're focusing on recouping some of the lost barrels, especially of light sweet crude that they've lost out in Asia. So they make a stance. They've already said they're going to go back to the 2 million barrels per day plus and recoup those levels. They've already, with the latest announcements, recouped sort of 62% of that production volume. They've pumped it back into the market, or rather will, from July. Expect a further increase because I think the Saudis are not in the mood to sort of draw back. They think that they've protected the prices long enough, but others have taken advantage, yet somehow they're not finding the wider cooperation within the corridors of OPEC Plus, so they think they ought to pump more oil.
OK, we mentioned OPEC Plus's actions possibly hurting consumers elsewhere. The companies in the US, for instance, who've already mothballed drilling rigs. I mean, was this designed to hurt anyone?
I think this is the classic paradox from an American political perspective. Mr. Trump would want lower prices at the pump. So, Edwin, if we see prices plummet towards $50, it will be price positive for American consumers. So you have that. We park that to one side. You have the US industry and a lot of non-OPEC producers like Brazil, Guyana, Norway, Canada, etc., wanting higher prices. But in the same time, Mr. Trump's constituency in Texas, gets dented a bit with the whole drill, baby, drill thing. So US producers need north of $70, but US consumers would want low prices. Now, Mr. Trump can't have it both ways. I mean, he'll please the consumers, but the producers might be in trouble. So you're in that kind of phase whereby which it's a political paradox for the White House.
All right, and what about the rest of us who aren't in the United States? Can we look forward to lower gas prices soon?
I suspect that this is very price positive for consumers all around the world. What you have right now is a lot of non-OPEC oil. So demand growth, global demand growth is just north of 1 million barrels per day this year. That can be serviced by non-OPEC alone. We can just park the OPEC hikes. Non-OPEC can service those alone. And for that reason alone, there'll be an awful lot of crude out in the market, and it's going to play out. And the US producers, if I may add, they're hedged for the moment. For the next 6 to 12 months, they'll also keep pumping. So expect a whole lot of more oil, and that means low prices at the pump.
Gaurav, it's always great to talk to you. Thanks for making sense of that for us. We'll talk to you again.
Thank you.
Now, coffee is, of course, one of the most consumed beverages every day right around the world. But a morning caffeine fix is becoming so expensive. Over the past year, the price of coffee has nearly doubled. Now, there are several factors that are brewing trouble for the industry, including climate change and supply chain disruption. We spoke earlier to David Oxley, the chief climate and commodities economist at Capital Economics, and asked him if prices are going to ease anytime soon.
We have seen prices come down of late. So the price of Arabica beans and Robusta beans are currently around 20 to 25% lower than the peak they reached, or record highs they reached early this year in February. That said, I mean, to put that into context, prices are still about 3 times higher than they were before the start of the pandemic. So, yeah, there has been some progress, but partly or potentially because of some of this sort of speculative froth coming out the market. And expectations for the growing year next year, which in Brazil at least starts next month, are slightly more positive. You know, we have the USDA, you know, a world's authority on agricultural forecasts and production. They are actually forecasting a continued drop in the Arabica crop in Brazil, which accounts for about 2/3 of Brazilian coffee production. But they are expecting a 15% increase in the more resilient Robusta bean. And they're also expecting a pickup in output of Robusta, mainly from Vietnam next year.
Right, I'm off for a brew. That's our show for this week. If you'd like to comment on anything that you've seen, I'm at A. Finnegan on X. Please use the hashtag AJCTC, or you can drop us a line. Countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our email address. As always, there's plenty more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That takes you straight to our page, and there you'll find individual reports, links, and entire episodes for you to catch up on. But that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan from the team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.